$1 million to promote LGBTQI+ in the African nation of Lesotho, which nobody has ever heard of. $60 million for indigenous peoples and Afro-Colombian empowerment in Central America. $60 million. $8 million for making mice transgender. This is real.
In yet another instance that has drawn global attention, former US President Donald Trump sparked outrage and debate with his dismissive comments about Lesotho, a small but sovereign nation in southern Africa. During an address to the US Congress, Trump referred to Lesotho as a country nobody has ever heard of, a remark that immediately ignited a firestorm of criticism and ridicule across social media platforms. This incident is not an isolated one. It is part of a broader pattern of derogatory remarks made by Trump about African nations, which have often been characterized as dismissive, disrespectful, and rooted in a lack of understanding of the continent's diversity and significance. Lesotho, a landlocked country entirely surrounded by South Africa, is home to approximately 2.3 million people. Despite its small size, Lesotho has a rich history and cultural heritage, having gained independence from Britain in 1966. The country operates as a constitutional monarchy and is known for its stunning mountainous landscapes, earning it the nickname the Kingdom in the Sky. However, Lesotho faces significant challenges, including one of the highest HIV/AIDS rates in the world, which has necessitated substantial international aid and support. The United States has been a key partner in addressing these challenges, providing critical funding for healthcare, social support, and development programs. Yet, Trump's recent comments have cast a shadow over this partnership, raising questions about the future of U.S. foreign aid and its impact on vulnerable populations. During his address to Congress, Trump highlighted what he described as wasteful U.S. aid projects, singling out Lesotho as an example. He specifically mentioned an $8 million allocation aimed at promoting LGBTQ+ rights in the country, a statement that was met with laughter from some U.S. lawmakers. Trump's remarks were not only dismissive of Lesotho's sovereignty, but also reflected a broader skepticism toward foreign aid, which has been a recurring theme throughout his political career. His comments immediately sparked a heated debate on social media, with many users expressing outrage at what they perceived as a lack of respect for African nations. The backlash was swift and widespread. Social media platforms were flooded with posts questioning Trump's geographical knowledge, with many users pointing out that Lesotho is, in fact, a real country with a distinct identity and history. Some users took a more lighthearted approach, creating memes that mocked Trump's apparent ignorance. One user even suggested that Lesotho should be renamed Trump U as a satirical nod to the former president's tendency to attach his name to various ventures. However, beyond the humor, there was a palpable sense of frustration and disappointment among many who felt that Trump's remarks were emblematic of a broader disregard for Africa and its people. Lesotho's response and the reality of U.S. aid. In response to Trump's claims, the main LGBTQ+ organization in Lesotho, known as the People's Matrix, issued a statement clarifying that it had not received the $8 million in U.S. funding that Trump had referenced. The organization expressed confusion over where the funds had been allocated, stating that it had no knowledge of who had received or was intended to receive the money. This revelation further fueled the debate over the transparency and effectiveness of U.S. foreign aid, with critics arguing that Trump's comments were not only inaccurate but also harmful to the ongoing efforts to support marginalized communities in Lesotho. The reality is that U.S. aid to Lesotho has played a crucial role in addressing some of the country's most pressing challenges. Since 2006, the United States has committed more than $630 million to anti-HIV/AIDS efforts in Lesotho, providing life-saving medication and social support to those affected by the epidemic. These programs have been particularly important for sexual minorities, who often face stigma and discrimination in accessing healthcare services. In addition to healthcare, the U.S. has also supported initiatives aimed at promoting trade facilitation, renewable energy development, good governance, and disaster risk reduction in Lesotho. These efforts have helped to improve the quality of life for many Basotho, the people of Lesotho, and have strengthened the country's capacity to address its development challenges. The impact of Trump's foreign aid freeze. However, since Trump's return to the White House in January, foreign aid to countries like Lesotho has come under intense scrutiny. One of Trump's first actions was to order a 90-day freeze on foreign aid, a move that has had far-reaching consequences for U.S.-funded programs around the world. In Africa, the freeze has already led to the dismissal of thousands of health workers and the closure of clinics, leaving vulnerable populations without access to essential services. In Lesotho alone, over 1,500 health workers, approximately 7% of the country's entire health staff, have been laid off as a result of the funding cuts. The impact of these layoffs has been devastating. Lesotho's healthcare system, already strained by the high prevalence of HIV/AIDS, is now facing an even greater crisis. In response, the country's health ministry has called on final year medical students and recent graduates to volunteer at local health centers in an effort to fill the gap left by the layoffs. While this initiative has provided some relief, it is not a sustainable solution. The long-term consequences of the funding cuts could be dire, with thousands of lives hanging in the balance as essential programs are scaled back or discontinued. Trump's remarks about Lesotho and his broader approach to foreign aid have raised important questions about the future of U.S.-Africa relations. For decades, the United States has been a key partner in supporting development and humanitarian efforts across the African continent. However, under the Trump administration, this partnership has been called into question. Trump's America First policy, which prioritizes U.S. interests above all else, has led to a reduction in foreign aid and a more transactional approach to international relations. This shift has been particularly concerning for African nations, many of which rely on U.S. support to address critical challenges such as poverty, disease, and climate change. The freeze on foreign aid is just one example of how the Trump administration's policies have impacted Africa. In addition to cutting funding for healthcare and development programs, the administration has also sought to restrict immigration from several African countries, citing security concerns. These actions have been widely criticized as discriminatory and have contributed to a perception that the Trump administration is indifferent to the needs and aspirations of African nations. The controversy surrounding Trump's remarks about Lesotho highlights the power of social media in shaping public opinion and holding leaders accountable. Within hours of Trump's address, social media platforms were flooded with posts criticizing his comments and expressing solidarity with Lesotho. Hashtags such as Stand with Lesotho and Lesotho is Real began trending as users from around the world shared information about the country's history, culture, and challenges. This outpouring of support was a powerful reminder of the global community's ability to come together in defense of marginalized voices. At the same time, social media also became a space for humor and satire, with users creating memes and jokes that mock Trump's apparent lack of geographical awareness. While these posts provided a moment of levity, they also served to underscore the seriousness of the issue. By drawing attention to Trump's remarks, social media users helped to amplify the voices of those who were directly affected by the funding cuts, and to hold the former president accountable for his words and actions. The historical context of U.S.-Africa relations. To fully understand the significance of Trump's remarks, it is important to consider the historical context of U.S.-Africa relations. For much of the 20th century, Africa was largely overlooked by U.S. policymakers, who viewed the continent as peripheral to their strategic interests. However, this began to change in the post-colonial era, as African nations gained independence and sought to establish themselves on the global stage. The United States, recognizing the potential for economic and political partnerships, began to increase its engagement with the continent. During the Cold War, Africa became a battleground for ideological influence, with the United States and the Soviet Union vying for allies among the newly independent nations. This period saw the U.S. provide significant military and economic aid to African countries, often with the aim of countering Soviet influence. However, this aid was frequently tied to political conditions, leading to accusations that the U.S. was more interested in advancing its own agenda than in supporting genuine development. In the post-Cold War era, U.S.-Africa relations entered a new phase, characterized by a focus on humanitarian aid, democracy promotion, and economic development. The establishment of initiatives such as the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, or PEPFAR, under President George W. Bush marked a significant shift in U.S. policy, with a greater emphasis on addressing the root causes of poverty and disease. This approach was continued under President Barack Obama, who sought to strengthen ties with Africa through initiatives such as Power Africa, which aimed to increase access to electricity across the continent. The Trump administration's approach to Africa represents a departure from this tradition of engagement by prioritizing domestic interests and adopting a more transactional approach to foreign policy. Trump has signaled a willingness to disengage from the continent and to reduce U.S. involvement in global affairs more broadly. This shift has been met with concern by many African leaders, who fear that it could undermine decades of progress and leave their countries vulnerable to external threats. At the same time, Trump's rhetoric has also raised questions about the underlying attitudes that inform U.S. policy toward Africa. His derogatory remarks about African nations, including his alleged reference to them as shithole countries, have been widely condemned as racist and xenophobic. These comments have not only damaged the United States' reputation on the continent, but have also fueled a sense of resentment and mistrust among African leaders and citizens. As the debate over U.S. foreign aid continues, the future of U.S.-Africa relations remains uncertain. While the Biden administration has signaled a willingness to re-engage with the continent and to restore funding for critical programs, the legacy of the Trump era continues to loom large. The freeze on foreign aid and the dismissive rhetoric that accompanied it have left a lasting impact, raising questions about the United States' commitment to its African partners. For Lesotho, the stakes are particularly high. The country's healthcare system, already struggling to cope with the HIV/AIDS epidemic, is now facing an even greater crisis as a result of the funding cuts. The layoffs of health workers and the closure of clinics have left thousands of people without access to essential services, putting lives at risk. In the absence of U.S. support, Lesotho will need to find alternative sources of funding and to strengthen its own capacity to address these challenges. The controversy surrounding President Trump's remarks about Lesotho is a stark reminder of the importance of respectful and informed engagement in international relations. By dismissing Lesotho as a country nobody has ever heard of, Trump not only displayed a lack of geographical awareness, but also undermined the United States' role as a global leader and partner. The fallout from his comments has highlighted the fragility of U.S.-Africa relations and the need for a more thoughtful and inclusive approach to foreign policy. As the world continues to grapple with the challenges of poverty, disease, and inequality, the importance of international cooperation and solidarity cannot be overstated.